Welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to cover Network Address Translation, NAT. NAT is a very important concept because we currently use IPv4 as the dominant protocol, and that's both internally on our internal networks as well as on the public internet. Now, IPv4 does have a limitation in that it supports up to 4.3 billion addresses. Now, that might sound like a big number, but actually we're very close to exhausting that number already. Obviously, the world is a big place with 7 billion people. We have lots of different devices these days, including Internet of Things devices. So we're starting to connect more and more things to the internet, in addition to our computers and our mobile phones. So IPv4 definitely has a big limitation, and we couldn't connect every device, including all of our internal computers, to the internet with IPv4. But it is the protocol we're primarily using, so we have to find a way around that. And network address translation is the solution for that problem. So let's first look at a network without network address translation. So as you know, there are private IP address ranges. So we often use these private addresses for the computers on our internal networks. Now, what if we want to connect those computers to the internet via a router? Now, the router has an address on the internal network range, and that's a private IP address, so that's only able to be used within the company office or the data center. The router has a public IP address, so it has an IP address that's routable on the public internet. So what's going to happen when a device on our internal network tries to send data via the router to the internet? Well, public IP addresses are used on the internet, but private IP addresses are not routable on the internet. So in this configuration, computers with private IP addresses cannot communicate on the internet without some other trickery to help us out. So let's look at that in more detail. Well, let's say that this computer is trying to communicate with a web server. The source of the traffic is going to be 192.168.0.2. So the source address is going to be the source address of the primary interface on this computer. The destination is the IP address on the internet. That's an internet routable IP address. Now, if the communication did get received and was responded to, then what would happen is it would fail on the way back because the return address would have a destination of 192.168.0.2. Now that address is not able to be routed on the internet, which means no internet router is going to know where to send that data to. So it will just get dropped. So that definitely doesn't work. So we have to find a way around this situation. And that's where network address translation comes in. So now our router is performing the NAT functions as well. And what that means is when we send that data, the source address is going to be changed to the address of the router, so the public IP address. So you see this data is going out to the web server, but the NAT device has translated the source address, so it's not the source address of the computer. And that means that it can be routed on the internet. So when the return traffic comes back, the destination address is the address of the router, and the router is then able to swap back again the destination address to the actual address of the computer itself. So it's performing that swapping function. It's swapping out the source and the destination addresses so that we can then use a public internet. So that means that all of the devices on the internal network, even if you had hundreds or thousands of devices, are going to appear to be the same IP address on the internet. So the NAT service is taking care of translating those addresses for you. Now, it doesn't always happen in a router. Sometimes it happens separately in something called a proxy server. But this is one particular solution that you could put in place where your router performs a NAT function as well. So that's how NAT works at a conceptual level, and we'll look at how we can actually implement NAT in the AWS cloud in the next section.